Hideaki Anno's masterpiece of telling people to go outside and touch grass.
I love it. An appropriately timed message.
残酷な天使のように少年よ神話になれ
Hello everyone and welcome to the Atcast, a podcast for the study of modern visual culture. I'm your illustrious destroyer of Evangelion, Soup.
And I'm your 13th angel, Renu.
This week, AT stands for Absolute Terror, because we'll be talking about Evangelion 3.0+1.0 Thrice Upon a Time, or Shin Evangelion Gekijoban. But before we get into that, what have we been up to?
So I don't want to spend too much time on catch up since I'm really eager to get into the topic. But
Sure.
basically, to sum up the past month and a half of my life, I've had a convention every 2 weeks. So my appearance on the internet has been quite spotty. If you guys have been attending Soupy and me and our stream of Ace Attorney, you would know that I've had to miss out every other week, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's been busy but fun. I got to meet up again with a bunch of artists that I haven't seen in 2 years, essentially. So we had a nice, cute little reunion and all that. And a lot of people are eager to get out of the house and do stuff again. Conventions are, for the most part, trying to keep things as safe as possible. They're requiring everyone to be vaccinated, fully vaccinated even, and bring their vaccination records and everything, and wear masks at all times, hand sanitizer, hand washing, and all of that, trying to keep things, as Gucci as possible. But yeah, no, it's been great. I've gotten to the point where I haven't had much time to restock, and so my last convention that happened just now, I got cleaned out. I came home with very little things, which is great. Yeah.
Good job.
So I won't have another convention until November, so that'll be cool. I can rest for a while.
Nice.
Yep. Yeah. So what about you?
I have a couple of small things, really. I got a couple of pairs of new glasses. So I got one for regular wear, and I got one for sunglasses for driving, because for some reason I had sunglasses that were prescription sunglasses, and at some point in the transition between because my sister and I were sharing a car, and we're still sharing a car, but we transitioned to sharing a different car. And in that time, my sunglasses just sort of disappeared, which kind of sucks. Because they're prescription sunglasses for my really bad prescription, so they're expensive. And
oh no!
Not only are they expensive, they're completely pointless for anybody that's not me. You couldn't even realistically, I think, sell these for anything more than scrap change, right?
Oh my god!
But which is sad, because I like that pair of sunglasses a lot. That pair was really nice. But whatever. I have a new pair of sunglasses. I have a new pair of glasses. I've been rocking the new pair of glasses for a while now. About 2 or 3 weeks now, and it's been really weird. It's like when you dye your hair and you forget that you dye your hair. So every time you look in the mirror, you're like, oh, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
It defamiliarizes you with your face in a way that's very bizarre.
Sure.
But I've come to enjoy my new glasses. I've been using the other glasses for 3-ish years now.
Ooh.
They're the ones I got when my other glasses broke, when they just kind of snapped down the middle.
Oh
And
my
that
God.
that pair was it was like plastic, polycarbonate stuff. and it was like chipping. Like the nose bridge was like chipping because like that's where it like touches like my face oils and presumably like the face products I use and stuff. So it's been on the way out for a while now, but it has at least hung in there until I could swap them out. I got a new pair and I'm really enjoying it. This is the first time I've had metal glasses in quite some time, I gotta say. Because I didn't have metal glasses for like basically the entire time I was in college, I think. Yeah, I made the switch over sometime in like senior year of college, not college, high school or something. And from then on, I just never wore polycarbonates, or not polycarbonate. I've never worn metal lens frames until now. And as a result, this is the first glasses I've had in a while that have like nose pads. So, it's been interesting. I'm actually really sad, and I mentioned this to you when we were watching that thing together. I am so upset about the style of glasses that like are popular here in the States, because one, a lot of we've kind of wrapped back around to like big like bottle cap glasses, but like with very thin frames. Because that's like kind of what's like trendy now, right? But I like those. I cannot wear them. My prescription is too strong. I cannot wear those. My glasses will not fit in those because they are too powerful.
Oh no.
So that's I'm like, even with like the like featherweight, the lightest, the sort of like lightest and smallest the glasses can be, it's still just like it doesn't fit. The shape just doesn't fit. Whatever. But the other bad thing is we don't have more interesting styles. Like I really want glasses and we mentioned this. I really want those like half rim glasses, the ones that like the bottom is rimmed and the top is like open. Which is a very popular style in Japan, not a very popular style here. By which I mean it's like very difficult to find those kinds of glasses here, which sucks.
Right.
My like dream pair of glasses is it's funnily enough a Grand Blue Fantasy like collaboration frame. So
that's
whatever.
cute though.
yeah, it looks really nice. And I if I had glasses like that, even if they were like more plain, if they didn't have the little details, I don't really care. The like shape of it is really nice, and I really want those. But for now, I'll live with these. They're nice enough, and they didn't like super break the bank because they were from Costco. Costco is a very nice place to get your glasses. They even accept some kinds of insurance if you have that.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've done that. I have been mostly doing a lot of streaming recently. I finished Kiwami 2, Yakuza Kiwami 2.
Yeah.
And have started Yakuza 3. That it's okay. It is very funny going from Yakuza Kiwami 2, which is the remake of Yakuza 2, to just the remaster of Yakuza 3.
Right.
Because like because you have all of the like polished systems of like the newest games. You have the kind of like weighty animation, and then you go to Yakuza 3 and like you can just like turn Kiryu on a dime. You're like, wee.
I was wondering. That's what I'm afraid of when I start Yakuza 3, is that it'll feel so like a step back, like such a big step back from
it
0 and 1 and 2 Kiwami.
It definitely feels like you are being transported back to an earlier era of video games. But honestly, I think with a little bit of adjustment, it's like a little bit of time to adjust. It's not too bad. Like obviously, it's still Yakuza. Like you still press the buttons and you beat people up, and that part is still fun. I think the most annoying thing for me personally is the map, because in the remakes and 0, you can essentially press one button and go to the map, but there's no such pathway, I think, to get to the map in Yakuza 3. So you have to like press start, and then you have to go like to the menu, and then you have to click the menu, and then you have to click X to like zoom in on the menu, and then you can look around. And it's just, it's like, oh my god, this is so clunky. Like, this is, the UI design is literally destroying me. Plus, like, returning to the system where you only have like X number of inventory slots total for like all your equipment and your items is like kind of, it feels like such a downgrade. You're like, no, let me carry all the staminans. But yeah, I mean, overall it's still a good time, and I think Yakuza 3 is shaping up to be very interesting.
Okay.
I like that it's set in Okinawa, and it just comes out the gate with like, all right, so here's Okinawa, here's Kiryu, he's been living here for a little bit, and now they want to build either a resort here or a military base. What are you gonna do about it? Which is great, because like, both of those things would be really bad, for various reasons. For those of you that don't know, Okinawa is like Japan's Hawaii. So it is like a more kind of tropical island like vibe, right? And as a result, it has all of the kind of problems that Hawaii does, where it's like a very big like tourist destination. Like people, like the people who live there are basically always in danger of like the financial collapse of the entire economy, and people keep trying to build shit there, right? And obviously, like, Okinawa has a history of housing American military bases, so it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very explicitly political, which isn't to say like, Yakuza isn't explicitly political. God knows the like plot of the last couple of games, But yeah, I've been having a good time with it. I'm really just looking forward to getting back into it, and sinking my teeth into it. But it's definitely like, it's like getting into a cold pool after being in like a nice like chill like hot tub for a while,
Mm-hmm.
Back in my day, game design, you had to press 6 buttons to get to the map, and all that, But on the other hand, that is also kind of one of the appeals of it, right? It's like you get to kind of interact with the game as it was, more or less. I don't know exactly what the remaster of it means, to the extent of, I don't know if they've changed anything other than like maybe done something to the graphics. It looks a lot chunkier too, which is very funny. Like, you go from the cutscenes of the previous games where you can like see all of the pores on like all the actors, and then like, here's Kiryu. He is very chunky. He's very blocky. He's a big rectangle man. Yeah. Having a great time though. Yakuza's fun,
Good.
It's never
I mean,
not fun.
it should be.
Yeah. Looking forward to playing more of that. And that's mostly what I've been up to. Can't say that there's a lot more interesting. Oh, my parents are setting up a hot tub. We've had a hot tub for...
Whoa.
We got the hot tub a while ago, but my dad has not bothered to set it up, and so it's just been sitting there. But it sounds like he wants to set it up tonight and use it. So I'll report back, I guess, next time about how it is. But having a hot tub sounds really nice. It's been really cold here lately, for the last couple days at least. It's been very like cold. Not like, cold, but like it was consistently like 90, 100 degrees for a while, and this week it's been like 70, right? It's like a very stark difference. So it's been weird, but yeah. Without further ado, shall we talk about Evangelion?
The last one.
The last one. Well,
The
okay, we should probably
finale.
talk about the previous one first.
Yes, so we haven't touched on Evangelion 3.0. So since this is 3.0
Look forward
plus
to this
1.0,
Christmas.
Yeah. We'll go ahead and touch on it now. Yeah, so 3.0, controversially to the fans, starts after a huge time skip. Shinji's been locked away after causing the near third impact at the end of 2.0. We learn that it has catastrophic consequences, along with Shinji, as he kind of wakes up and realizes that absolutely everyone around him hates him.
Yep.
Asuka tries to punch him through glass. Misato doesn't want anything to do with him. Everyone pretty openly despises him. And they're all begging him to never pilot an Eva ever again. And he is just confused because he thought that he saved Rei at the end of 2.0, because that was what he was trying to do the whole time at the end, by getting into the Eva and going after her. Then, while he's being despised and imprisoned and whatnot, a Rei-like voice calls to him, and he calls back, and then suddenly an Eva bursts through the hull of the ship and is there to collect Shinji. And he goes with her, and again, is begged to not pilot the Eva by none other than Toji's little sister, Sakura. And then he gets taken away. He gets taken to Nerve, where he meets his pretty soon-to-be boyfriend, Kaoru.
Yep.
They essentially are wrapped up in Gendo's scheme to have them co-pilot basically a dual-rigged Evangelion, where they can have two pilots at the same time. It's got a double entry plug system. And in the meantime, Shinji and Kaoru get to know each other, and Shinji has to contend with the fact that he ended the world, that the Rei that he meets at Nerve is not the same Rei that he had tried to save. And yeah, Kaoru shows him that the world has gone through yet another mass extinction, which is apparently not uncommon for their world.
Mm-hmm.
And he proposes that them piloting the Eva together will allow them to save the world, and allow Shinji a chance at redemption and hope and all of that. So Shinji agrees to do this with him. They play piano to bond with each other and to synchronize and everything. So when they hop into the robot, they go down and are interrupted by Mari and Asuka and Misato, who is the head of Wile, who is this organization that is built to oppose Nerve and Gendo and all of them, because it's become very apparent by now that Gendo wants to destroy everything, according to them, and they are there to stop him. Essentially the conflict ends with Shinji being deceived into taking up 2 spears of Cassius, and that essentially causes yet another, or is like the trigger for yet another impact. And the whole time there's this theme of DSS choker that was placed on Shinji at the very beginning that's meant to essentially stop him from being a trigger for the next impact. And by it will explode his head, essentially, if they detect that he's going to become a trigger. But over the course of him and Kaoru bonding, Kaoru removes the choker from him and puts it on around his own neck to essentially show that he wants to share in Shinji's burden and help him, take responsibility for what happened. And he wants to gain Shinji's trust by doing so as well. But because the trigger for the impact is happening anyway because of Kaoru's presence, Misato activates the choker and then Kaoru dies instead. And then the movie basically ends after that. Asuka I think I'm trying to remember if it was Asuka or Mari who gets Shinji out, but regardless, Shinji, Asuka, and Rei end up separated from Mari and the rest of Wile, and they end up wandering the hellscape that is left of Earth at the end of the movie. So that is a very rough summary of 3.0. Definitely watch it for yourself. It's the movie that I've rewatched the most, and yet I still can't summarize it appropriately.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, with that, let's get into Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0 Thrice Upon a Time.
Yeah, so for this movie really references the previous rebuilds, even though the staff say that you only really need to have watched the end of Evangelion to understand Shin Evangelion. My personal opinion is that you should watch
you should probably watch
all of the
3.0.
other rebuilds first before you hop into this one.
I think you have to watch 3.0.
Yeah, I think you should.
I don't think that's negotiable.
But I mean, that's what they said. It's like, oh, you only because this is just like End of Evangelion, so you should just watch that. But it's like really stuff. It's really not. It builds on like everything that you've created through the rebuild universe or iteration of this universe. So yeah. Definitely watch that before you hop into this, because it just picks up right where it leaves off in 3.0 with the pilots walking through the red world that has been apparently transformed into like core material or something like that, and all of the headless Evangelion looking things in the background are the human remains that had been affected by the near third impact, so it's all apparently people, which is really horrifying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty spooky. I would not want to live in that zombie apocalypse movie, that particular one.
Yeah.
So I guess the best place to start would be by talking about the animation, which is of course gorgeous.
Yes.
It is probably like the best looking anime movie, I think. I mean, just in terms of like technical proficiency, from like just all the backgrounds to the way that the action scenes blend like 2D and CG animation, to the like process it. Like, you can tell why this movie was delayed like 3 different times before it came out.
Apparently, rumor has it that whenever Anno wanted something and it couldn't be done with their current technology, he would just delay the movie.
Just invent it.
Yeah, until it could be done.
I mean, that makes sense, to be fair. Like, if I were to like essentially be creating the sort of final version of my creative work,
right.
I would want to not have to go back and do it again.
Yeah.
You know? Like the rebuilds of Evangelion are basically Hideaki Anno being like, this is Evangelion the way I always wanted to make it. And, you know, like 30 years down the line, it sure does look like that, bud. There is a lot going on here. But yeah, I was constantly astounded by, you know, not just the very fluid and interesting like action sequences, and the like bombastic set pieces, you know, all the boats being strung along by wire and flying around, right? That stuff was all very impressive, but I know that when we were watching it together, you know, you kept pointing out how good the backgrounds were and how very pretty they are, right?
Yes.
Like, just everything in this movie is just they just nailed it, right? 100%, they just nailed it. You know, and that is interesting because like along with the sort of like upgrade, I guess, in terms of fidelity in you know, new processes and technologies and workflows, right? It also is very interesting that we get a version of Evangelion that feels so much more like populated and full, right? Where the original Evangelions, it's kind of a myth that like they were like very like budget restrained. It was mostly just like production, honestly, that made them like that. Obviously, you know, the last couple episodes are those like very just abstract like pencil drawings, and you know, like it is very interesting that like Evangelion originally, and I'm sure we've mentioned this in one of the previous episodes about the rebuilds, but they feel so much more populated and much less abstract. But it's also very interesting because it serves a thematic purpose in the sort of progression of Evangelion as a piece about, you know, Shinji, maybe as like a metaphor for Anno's depression, and moving into, you know, the rebuilds where it feels so much more alive, and it's kind of like Anno is like expressing the difference between, you know, where he was back then and where he is now, right? It feels like there is a marked difference in the way that like people are treated in these movies as opposed to the series.
Yeah.
So this movie is just it's a lot. There's a
It
lot
sure
to
is a lot.
take in. But at the same time, it's actually very straightforward. I think for at least for an Eva movie, it's very straightforward. Like obviously, there's all the stuff about pew pew. Got the secret organizations who are trying to melt everybody into human soup, right? You got all that stuff going on. But at the end of the day, the sort of core of the movie is very much just, we're gonna end Evangelion now. It's over, guys, right? Like,
Yes.
you know, it's a very contemplative, like pensive movie where Shinji just spends like half of it, like 2/3 of it just traumatized.
Yes,
He literally just sits there and he doesn't say anything. He just has traumatic flashbacks about watching Kaoru's head explode. Right?
Yeah.
And it is so different because the first scene obviously is this big action set piece where Mari is like fighting off a bunch of these like man-made like Evas, right? And then you just spend the next like hour just going along with Shinji being in like just a catatonic state where he doesn't do anything. And then like Asuka and Rei are just kind of like living their lives, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that sounds like it could potentially be very boring, right? But I promise you it is not. And I think it's such a like strong like it's just like such a decision to make for your main character to just not do anything for like most of the movie. And I think it really just kind of works for many reasons that we'll obviously get into.
I mean, on the one hand, it's not the first time that Anno has done this kind of thing with Shinji, or
right.
You know, Shinji has done this before where he's left and you just follow him wandering through the outskirts of the city, and it's very quiet. He just keeps going. There's no action or anything. There's not hardly any talking at all, except for at the very end when he reaches an uncrossable bridge, and then he finally says, all right, you know, he acknowledges the fact that he's been followed this whole time and that he's ready to go back, you know. So
yeah. So it's like that, but most of the movie.
Yeah.
But I think actually what really works about that to me is on one hand, it's very like, one, it's very in character for Shinji. Two, I think it's important for Shinji to have that time in the story to cope with everything that's been happening, because a lot has been happening. And three, I really like that in that time we get a lot of everyone else, right? Because the thing about Eva is a lot of Eva, because it's kind of mostly told from like Shinji's sort of point of view, really, and we follow Shinji a lot. We don't get as much time on some of the other characters. Like this was a thing that we talked about with 2.0, where Asuka kind of gets like relegated to the backseat, but she really comes to the forefront in 3.0 and 3.0+1.0. And I think that's one, really interesting, and two, very cool, because I really liked getting to see an Asuka that was like trying to move on, right? I like the idea of while Shinji was asleep, right, was just not there. Like 14 years have passed, and like everyone else has moved on, except for Shinji, right? And that is like the sort of central piece of 3.0 and like 3.0+1.0 is Shinji feeling like he's been left behind, because he has, obviously the world has moved ahead without him, but it is interesting just from the perspective of like, one, the idea of Evangelion as like Sekai-kei, about like how the world moves in accordance to your relationships and your emotional state, right?
Right.
And the world moving past you, but also as like, if we read it as a metaphor for Anno's depression, right? Like, it is a very, 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 very like common feeling for people with depression to feel as if they have lost that time, as if that time doesn't exist, right?
Right.
A lot of people who have depression, and this is like a very common thing with like queer people who they spent so much time in their lives like closeted or not being able to express themselves as something that feels true to them, right? As a result, they don't get to experience those years, and those are very important years, right? Those are like your childhood and your teen years. Those are where you develop into a person, and so you have it's a very common thing. And like, obviously there's like this like kind of comorbidity between like queerness and depression, not as an inherent thing, but as like a societal sort of pressure thing, right?
Right.
But like, it's very common for people to realize like, oh, I'm like getting to experience what it was like to be a teenager, but like in my 20s, now that I'm like free from my parents and like the home environment, right?
Yeah.
And I love that, right? I love that this movie is so like, it's very funny because Evangelion is like, on one hand, like a very like brutal action mecha where like giant flesh mechs bump into each other and like rip their arms off and stuff, and like there's guts everywhere and like they're eating each other and it's horrific. But like 3.0 and 3.0+1.0 are very gentle movies, at least when it comes to addressing Shinji emotionally, right? It's acknowledging that he doesn't, he feels that he's been left behind, right? The world has moved on past him, right? Because, and I think like, if we go back to the idea of like Evangelion as Sekai-kei, it's because he feels the world has moved on, and so it has, right? And so we get that contrast of like, just like this like young locked in time Shinji, and then the other pilots who have not physically matured but have emotionally matured, and then the rest of the world, which has just straight up moved on, right? Like, we see Toji, and he's technically a doctor,
my
and you're like,
God,
what do I do? Oh my God, he's like a guy now. He's like a man.
it was like, after, so I would argue that 3.0 was pretty harsh on Shinji.
Okay, well, all right, 3.0 was pretty harsh.
But I would say, like, after watching 3.0 and the beginning of Shin Eva, and being just like in the slog of it, right? When Toji makes his first appearance, it is like a breath of fresh air, just like a spring breeze in the form of Toji, which you don't really expect, first of all, to see him again, because 3.0 like treats him like he's dead, right? You have his sister, who you can tell resents Shinji on some front, even though she's trying to be, respectful towards him and kind of friendly. And secondly, he receives Toji's school shirt, which horrifies Shinji, because that, like, he knows something bad happened to the rest of the world. He hasn't seen any of his friends. He can only presume that they were caught up in it, right? And so then he's here, he's back, and the fact that he's a representation of humanity surviving, him, the character that everyone thought was dead, survives, is like, it's so good.
Yeah, well, I think what's really astounding on that is that in 3.0, like we only really get, and like this is true for most of Ava, right? Where after a certain point, the sort of other characters in Shinji's life kind of like begin to like fade away as the world ending kind of begins, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a very marked difference between even the first like couple like the first three rebuild movies, which are very much about you know, like Nerve and Seal and these like big military governmental organizations, and that being kind of the only thing we see really, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like obviously in the show we get to see a little bit of Shinji's school life. We get a little bit of that in the rebuilds.
Yeah.
But after like, you know, after the point at which the world is supposed to have ended, you know, third impact or near third impact, right? That it stops being relevant. But I think it's a very marked difference you can see in the last rebuild movie, where instead of that, right, instead of everything being gone, you get what is left behind, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
get to see Toji, and you get to see him living in this like very rural communal space,
Yeah.
like, and like it is very communal living, right? Everybody kind of knows each other, they rely on each other for survival. All of
Mm-hmm.
the like all of the ladies are they go farming, right? And Toji is like filling in for kind of the doctor role, and
Mm-hmm.
um all of that stuff is, it kind of shows a very different worldview than the original Evangelion did.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
The idea that in the post-apocalypse there are still people with relationships with each other, you know, attempting to continue living no matter how hard it is, right? That's such a like that's such a marked difference from the end of Evangelion and the end of Evangelion
Yeah.
the movie, right?
Totally.
Where all that stuff gets like kind of abstracted away and
Yeah.
washed away, and like it's Shinji coming to terms with like kind of his stuff, like, you know, mostly like, you know, obviously through the influence of the people around him, but like, you know, he comes to his own conclusion about that, right? And that's like the most important thing. But in this one, you get to see all of the very little things, and you get to see how they affect like new Rei, right? The Rei that's not
Yes.
Rei, right?
Yes.
And how they change her and how they kind of like influence her and essentially make her like go from copy of human being to human being, right? It's a
Yeah.
very clear progression,
It's
and
very, very cool to watch.
it makes a lot of sense. You
Yeah.
know, not
Oh, no,
only with
totally.
Anno's like kind of sort of new changed worldview, but with the idea of like, you know, what is it that makes us into people, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
the sort of topic of Rei has been one that in the Evangelion space has always been kind of contentious, right? The idea of this is just like a person that we made in the image of Gendo's dead wife and Shinji's mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Rei fulfills this very like abstract role where she you know, grows through her relationship with Shinji, right?
Mm-hmm.
But is at the same time still this kind of like mother lover figure, this like very Freudian like Oedipal
Yeah.
figure. And the rebuilds kind of take that, and they very like gently kind of move her into being more of her own person.
Mm-hmm.
And then she turns into goo, obviously, but like, you know, it's an Evangelion movie. But
everyone turns to goo eventually.
yeah, but I think that is also that's also important, like, because it's like, oh no, that's sad, but also like it shows us Shinji's own progression within the movie, and like, you know, the idea that that Shinji, you know, when he was at the end of 3.0 and like watched Kaoru die, and like an hour right into 3.0 plus 1.0, he's spending all that time just traumatized. He can't do anything, right? But then when Rei, like new Rei dies, that's the moment like that Shinji has kind of come to terms with everything, and you can see the way that it affects him is different than the way that like Kaoru's death affected him, right? He's grown up in a way. And I think what's interesting is a lot of times Evangelion right? Most of Evangelion, I would say like 80%, 80 to 90% of it, right, is basically inside Shinji's head. It's so much about Shinji, right? Because,
Yes.
That's the way that it was crafted. That's the way that it kind of operates and works.
Mm-hmm.
But what's remarkable about Shin Evangelion is it's kind of not about Shinji, really, right?
Right.
So much
I
of
think
it
that's what's
takes
so
place
fascinating.
outside of him. Yeah.
Yes. It's that Shinji is more of like an observer character in this movie. It's not like him thinking to himself or talking to himself and images are being spliced across the screen in front of our eyes of what he's thinking of or what's happened to him and that kind of like very classic Evangelion level of storytelling. It's the story just like kind of very methodically paced and him just kind of going and experiencing what's happened to the world, and we don't spend hardly any time at all in his head. It's mostly time that we spend with other characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Like
Mhm.
it's interesting because like so Kaoru dying, right, is if we can kind of read Kaoru as like Shinji's idealized self, right?
Mhm.
Like, in addition to his boyfriend and whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like Kaoru represents the kind of person that like Shinji wants to be, the kind of person who can who is like pretty good at making relationships with other people, who can navigate the world as like a kind of like an adjusted person. Like Kaoru doesn't really have hangups, right?
Right. Mhm.
And like when Kaoru dies, right? Shinji feels like he loses that part of himself. He loses his idealized self,
Mhm.
and in a way he like is awoken very brutally from this like fantasy into the cold, dark reality of real life. And
Right.
Shineva is just him dealing with the fallout of that. And
Right.
it is like it's like slow, it's methodical, it's in many ways like kind of from the outset looks very harsh, but is truly very gentle about how it treats Shinji, and he kind of comes into his own as a result of that, right?
Yeah, it is legitimately like he watched his childhood dreams and therefore his childhood die and get robbed from him. And then he wakes up in this new world and kind of has to pick up his life again because he can't just sit there forever. And I think one of those pivotal moments of that part of the movie is when he decides that he has to eat.
Yeah.
He decides that he has to live and make that decision to move forward. Despite he can't just not make a decision,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think the status of Eva pilots comes under sort of the microscope when Asuka is talking about how like Eva pilots were basically forced to grow up too fast, right? These are, and like obviously this is something that we've been talking about, right? They're very flawed like people, right? Because they're children, right? And it's interesting because there's this kind of simultaneous play between in the story they are forced to grow up too fast because they have to save the world, right? We're forcing children to save us from the problems that we have caused, right? And they're either growing up too quickly, and that's a problem in and of itself, or they're like maladapting, right? Obviously,
yeah.
like we have, Shinji's motivations for piloting the Eva, and we have like Rei's, and then we have like Asuka, who does it for a completely different reason. She wants to be recognized, right? And it's so interesting that in this movie we get a little bit of insight into how Asuka feels about that. It's been 14 years, and she has come to terms in a lot of ways with that, right? And her body is frozen in time until the end of the movie when you see adult Asuka and you're like, hey, right? But at the same time, she has also kind of, in many ways, come to terms with her own problematic sort of maladaptations, right? And her own traumas. And I kind of like that. I like that we get to see like an adult Asuka who's just fed up with the fact that Shinji hasn't moved on in any way.
Yeah.
Like she says like Shinji doesn't need a lover, he needs a mother, right? And like that's basically it, right? It's like the core. It's like the core of the show is that like you know in many ways it's because Shinji did not have like guiding parental figures growing up that he grew up so terribly.
Yeah.
And it's not to say like you can't grow up maladaptively with parents. God knows that Asuka exists, right? But yeah,
well this Asuka didn't have parents really.
Okay, yeah, right. And it's also it works a lot because it's something that follows from Asuka's character arcs in the previous movies and iterations of the the show, where it's like Asuka feels like she needs to become an adult to fulfill the expectations of those around her, and like one of the ways that she does that is she wants to be in a romantic relationship with Kaji, right? And obviously like that's kind of on one hand played for jokes, but also like kind of like it speaks to Asuka's sort of issues,
right?
And it is very interesting that we get to see like what Asuka is like as an adult, right? Who realizes like we grew up too fast, we became adults too quickly, this actually sucks, right? And and it's interesting because she, in saying that like Shinji needs a mother and not a lover, she's kind of acknowledging that she was in that place too, where like she needed that kind of recognition, and she wasn't going to find it in a romantic relationship, right? She mentions how like I was like really into Kaji, and I probably had a crush on you when I was younger, and Shinji's like, thanks, man. Right?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think I'm actually just really fascinated that they went this route of analyzing all of the other characters in this movie. Because I think that's exactly what the series kind of needed to tie it off at the end.
Yeah, well, it feels like such a good like capstone on where the characters have been, and these are characters that have evolved for 30 years,
right? Yeah.
These are characters that have existed for a very long time, right? That like there's the idea that they're growing up too fast in the fiction, but on a sort of meta narrative level, they are forced to be children forever, right? Because of the way that we experience media and how that kind of like locks this section of time forever, right? And so in the popular culture, like Asuka will be a child forever, right? And so she is physically a child forever, right? And I think that's a very interesting way of addressing that, Like it's also very funny because Asuka's just a jaded adult for the whole movie, right?
Okay,
she's like, I don't want to put on pants. Fuck you.
Yeah, no, I actually when I was first watching this movie, I was like, man, Asuka's naked like basically the whole time, right? Like aside from when she puts on like her white plug suit or whatever, she's basically just naked. But even then, like her body is constantly being thrust in front of the camera. Right. And I think of how it contrasts with her first appearances on the show. Not necessarily like she wasn't naked, because she was in front of like Shinji and stuff like that. He got embarrassed and whatnot. But they literally have a scene where they contrast that scene where she's naked in front of Shinji and he has no reaction. And likewise, her reaction to that is completely different from how it was the first time, right? She's just kind of like disgusted with him, rather than being embarrassed. And she's just sick of him versus like, kicking him in the face like she did before. And so I think it's just a rather on-point representation of how done she is with everything, like how much she just doesn't care is why she's just naked for most of this movie.
Yeah. And like there is definitely a lot of that just in general with Asuka. Just like you get to see how 14 years has changed her, right?
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, and I I kind of like I really like the way that the other characters were treated, right? And how we get to see where all of them have kind of gone in the missing time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously we get to see like Toji, and he has like a child, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um and that's like kind of, and you're just like, oh man, what do I do with this information? But you have like Misato has a son who she like decides basically to like abandon and be like,
Mm-hmm.
I cannot raise this child to be a healthy adult. I will let the community do it, right? And it is like, on one hand you're like, Misato, come on. And on the other hand, you understand, right? You understand where she's coming from with her own
Yeah.
hangups about her
Well,
parents.
I think that's so interesting because during this movie, both her and Gendo basically learn how to be parents, right?
Right.
They both abandoned their sons, and yet their sons were able to meet during this movie and gonna hang out and like each other. And the difference being that, like, Misato at least comes to this realization first as to how to healthily interact with Shinji, like giving him a hug and encouraging
Right.
him to move forward and stuff like that. And then Gendo doesn't do it until the end of the
The very end of the movie.
Yeah, basically. but he
Yeah.
does give his son a hug and
Mhm.
you know, apologizes.
Yeah.
So I think that's just really that's really cool.
Well, the thing is, if we read like the rest of the Evangelion series as canon, right?
Mm-hmm.
The kind of like way that she feels about, or the way that she kind of like interacts with Shinji in End of Evangelion is in many ways like it feels like it's because of her own kind of like weird hangups about her parents and about her dad,
Right,
like
yeah.
she's just like, this will fix things. No,
Uh-huh.
Misato, this will not fix
Yeah.
anything. Right? And it's in many ways it is very like, it's a very like kind of juvenile idea of what it means to interact with like your the adult figures in your life and what it means to be a grown up. And
Mhm.
this movie readdresses them in a way that shows like growth and maturity.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It just handles it like Misato has become a parent basically, right? And it's kind of ironic, right? In giving up her child, she has learned how to become a parent, right? And she
Right.
kind of becomes this surrogate parent for Shinji, and she
Mhm.
kind of, in doing that, allows him to move on in many ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like have a mother figure in his life for once
Right.
in his life, right?
Right.
Like, people talk about how like Misato is basically like Shinji's mom, right? But I think in a lot of ways like that's true, but also it doesn't feel as fulfilled, right? As perfectly encapsulating until like this, right?
Right, yeah. Definitely.
Because I think that in the earlier movies, like Misato is still grappling with how to handle all of that.
Yeah, there's still a level of immaturity there.
Mhm.
And that's why it feels like her attempts at trying to resolve Shinji's problems feel inappropriate.
Yeah, right.
And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the anime focuses on how there was like an emphasis on sex in her life and how that was like her outlet or whatever.
Sure.
And the fact that she almost projects that onto Shinji became wildly inappropriate towards the end in the anime series. And so the fact that you get to see that genuine growth from how she used to be, like, someone who really didn't know how to handle this kid she was kind of trying to be like a big sister / guardian to him, but couldn't really fulfill either role.
Right.
And then now she has the confidence to, be able to guide him forward.
Yeah, well, it's like in kind of the previous iterations and the previous movies, Misato feels like she's Shinji's family, like very obviously, very clearly, but it's only now that it feels like she is his mother, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's pretty cool. I like the way that their relationship progressed in this movie.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I like the way that that came out. speaking of, okay, actually, there's one very small thing I want to touch on before we kind of like address the like kind of big topics of like Gendo and Mari and stuff, right? So I like that the spears of hope and despair, Gaius and Cassius, are like endlessly intertwined with each other. I like that they are both these very kind of damaging ideas in the way that they're presented. Like the idea of like, if you are in despair, you can't do anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you are clinging to hope, like a hopeless hope, then that's the same as despair, right? It's the same. And
right.
It's very cool if we kind of like zoom out and look at Gaius, the spear of mankind's willpower and knowledge, right? Is the key to unlocking the end of Evangelion. If we like kind of look at it from a broader perspective about like Evangelion as a kind of a picture into an ending world, the idea that you can't fall into hope or despair, right, at the sight of environmental collapse, right? You cannot simply hope that things will get better, and you cannot despair so hard you do nothing about it. It is mankind's willpower and knowledge that will pave the way for maybe even just an attempt at fixing the things that we've done, right? Because like the impacts are basically man-made catastrophes, like second impact, third impact. They're man-made like environmental disasters. Meant to fix humanity in kind of a weird way, right? But like, if we read that as an environmental kind of thing, then Gaius, the spear of mankind's willpower and knowledge, is like the idea of us banding together as human beings so that we can maybe do something about the environment that's collapsing. Just ask me how I know. It's smoke season here. You know?
I like the idea that the intertwining of hope and despair is so aptly represented in Gendo's motivations and the effects that he has. Like his motivation being that hopeless hope of seeing Yui again,
right?
But because he's clinging to it so hard and at the deficit of everyone else, he's just causing despair in his wake, and he doesn't end up manufacturing Gaius. He only ends up manufacturing Cassius.
Gaius is like the spear that represents everybody on like in like Misato's faction, right?
Right.
Like coming together and like doing something that realistically was in the first place kind of impossible, right? And that's cool, you know? That's cool. I also liked that the final Eva was the imaginary Eva.
Yeah.
There is something so, like... Okay, here's the thing about Evangelion, is on one hand, it is very, like, deep in that there's a lot of things in it, and a lot of those things may not make sense to begin with, but it's also very straightforward. It wears everything it wants to say pretty much on its sleeve. Like, it's actually not that complicated to, like, kind of piece out what the fuck Anno is saying. So, it is just both very cool and very funny to me that the imaginary Eva is the last one, right? And because it plays in this space where it is the line between imagination and reality, like where we can turn imagination into reality, and where imagination bleeds into reality, right? Like this intersection between reality and fiction and how they play with each other is literally like probably the only thing Hideaki Anno has been thinking about for the last 30 years, right? Like, because, you know, when you think about it, right, Evangelion is this very embedded piece of media in nerd culture. Pretty much everybody knows about it, and a lot of people experience it in a way that is in many ways counter to the way that that Anno intended, right? People are like, oh yes, Asuka is my waifu, right?
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, obviously, in many ways, I think it's pretty safe to say that like Anno sees that and given where he is now, at least, he's just like, that doesn't seem very healthy to me. You know? And like, obviously, you know, on one hand, it is very clearly this entire movie is just Hideaki Anno saying, please, for the love of God, I beg of you, go touch grass, right? I touched grass and it was fucking incredible, right? And on the other hand, it's not Anno saying like this is all worthless, like they should all be destroyed. You're all like maladaptations. You're all like sickos, right? It's Shin Eva feels like such a, because it treats Shinji in this way, it feels like such a gentle like guiding of people into like the real world, right? And that's very clear at the end of the movie when Anno just is like, all right, goodbye Evangelion, it's over, welcome to the real world. It's literally like, that's literally what the movie is.
Yeah, it feels like they round off the characters in a way that they become less of their like fetishized paper cutout versions of themselves, and they become like fleshed out human beings. And
well, the thing is that like in the first place, I don't ever think it was that they were portrayed that way.
No, they weren't portrayed that way. Right, exactly. They were interpreted that way, and it feels like there's a very keen awareness of that, and therefore the treatment of that is to show everyone, hey, these are the characters, and this is how they grew from their experiences. We don't forget that, you know, what they've been through, and this is how it's affected them and how they've chosen to live their lives.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, obviously that is a very important thing to examine when you are looking at Evangelion, specifically because End of Evangelion ends with just like a shot of a real movie theater, right? It's like all of Eva has been kind of like prototyping for like the rebuilds, and like this is the sort of like through line between End of Eva and Shin Eva, is it's literally just, and now the real world, right? And like,
right,
it's very kind of jarring in End of Eva. It feels very like weird and jarring, and it makes sense, but you're like, whoa, what the fuck, right? But in Shin Eva, again, it's like such a gentle like shepherding, right? It's like, all right, listen, guys, like I've been there, right? I know what this is like. I know what it's like to be depressed and to seek like escapism as as the cure to that, but that's no way to live forever, right? It feels like such a like I've been there, like it's such an like an empathic, like I've been there, but you can move forward as well, right? It is not impossible for you to do so, and it will be hard, but it will ultimately be better for you. And like it makes a lot of sense that the first three rebuilds are at least in the English titles, right? Obviously the Japanese titles are Jouhakyu and then Shin Eva, right? But the English titles of You Are Not Alone, right? The first movie of Shinji like realizing that he's not alone. You cannot advance the kind of end point of where Eva stopped, right? The idea that, you know, you can't continue forward. You don't have the ability to continue forward. And 3.0 you cannot redo. You can't fix your mistakes. And then Thrice Upon a Time, right? It feels like looking back at all of Eva and just thinking about it, like sitting down and thinking about Eva, right? And that's literally the movie. This is such a like sit down and just think about Evangelion movie, right?
I love that. Unlike the rest of the series, this movie really puts it out there, its exact messaging, and it's stated very precisely by the characters. They clarify everything. They're like, yes, Shinji had feelings for Asuka. Yes, she had feelings for him, and so on and so forth, right? They lay it out very flatly, very clearly, so that there's no room for like wibble wobble and yeah. It's because I think they were very intent on getting their message across. As
and
clearly
then
as
they
possible.
say goodbye Evangelion,
Yes.
and then they say Neon Genesis Evangelion. They say
Yes.
goodbye to all the Evangelions, and they create a
Yes.
new reality with no Evas. And
That's the Neon Genesis.
That's so funny. It's incredible.
It was so.
Okay. Like, Anna was like, I'm done.
Yes.
No more. Eva doesn't exist anymore. I've written it out of existence. But yeah, let us pivot and talk about Gendo, because Gendo is really this very central figure in Evangelion, despite the fact that we only ever really see him from like this like bottom up view from Shinji, right?
He's just always in his machinations and
right. So we on one hand know a lot about Gendo, right? We know like why he's doing what he's doing. We know what he's doing. We know like he's been scheming this because like he wants to see his dead wife again, right? And it is very interesting that Shin Eva makes the decision to just address Gendo. They're just like, all right, now Gendo, right? Because when Anna was writing Evangelion, right, you can very much tell that like Shinji is a metaphor for the way that Anna was relating to the world,
right? Yeah,
and you know, Anno has come out and said, like, well, by the end of it, I really was just feeling like Gendo, right? And
when he was doing this movie, he felt more like Gendo than Shinji.
And that is pretty much the kind of, like, culmination of a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, where, like, it's kind of time to address, like, Gendo, right? Gendo has essentially caused Evangelion to happen, right? And he has been this, like, antagonist figure for so long, and then Shin Eva just ends that with them, like, fighting, and then Shinji realizing, oh, fighting is pointless. It is pointless if I kill my father. I cannot kill my father in a way that matters, right? This idea of, this Oedipal idea of you must kill your father and have sex with your mother, you must become your father, that cycle gets broken because Shinji realizes it's pointless.
Right, yes.
And then they just have a conversation. They just sit down and they talk to each other. And, like, here's the thing, is, like I said, Evangelion is very deep and also very straightforward, right? Because it is very, it makes a lot of sense for Gendo and Shinji to have this final conflict where they just kind of, like, duke it out.
Yeah.
But it's so Eva to just decide, oh, this is actually pointless. This doesn't do anything.
No, I actually love that. And I know that there was... I read, like, a couple things here and there about people saying, like, oh, I think Shinji's transformation or, like come to realization during this movie was kind of abrupt, right? It happened, like, off-screen or whatever. My interpretation of it is that this has been happening over the course of the series where all of these characters in Shinji's life have been teaching him these things. He just didn't become aware of it until now. And now that he's aware of it, it was literally when they were fighting in the new colony that Toji was living in, the new village, that Shinji was reminded again, oh, if I keep fighting with my father, destruction is going to happen and nothing good is going to come out of this, right? They were in the ruins of the village. And then he was like, okay, well, I have to do something about this. This isn't going to happen. I have to sit down with my father and talk with him. And that's when you realize, okay, finally, Shinji is has absorbed all of his experiences and he has learned from them. And he knows how to address his father in a way that's different from how he's tried to address him previously, which was through confrontation or through, yelling at him or whatever.
Well, it's a very clear sign that, like, Shinji has grown up, and it doesn't feel abrupt to me because it feels thematically appropriate for the point we are in the story. Right? It's kind of time for Shinji essentially to tackle the source of all of his problems.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
And I like that that Shinji is able to recognize that that Gendo was like him, right? He was
Yes.
afraid of making relationships, and he
Yes.
made one that really mattered to him. And when he lost Yui, he felt like he was afraid of not being able to be alone again. And that's a very real and like just frightening feeling to have, right? And
Yeah.
you kind of get an idea for why Gendo fell into this this very obsessive spiral, right? And it's like not, on one hand it's very like it's very cliche, right, to have like a character who's just like, I'm doing all this so I can bring back my dead wife, right? But and I think in the rest of Evangelion it kind of feels that way, but like when you have that conversation in Shin Eva, it actually kind of hits home, like how much that obsession has like taken him and twisted him, and it makes sense.
Oh
right?
yeah, no, definitely. It makes sense so much, and the fact that like it does reflect upon Shinji, I think, is so like it hits home because like they bring up the theme a lot of the little tape player, right, that Shinji carries around, that used to belong to his father, and that was his way of essentially blocking out the rest of the world. And that was how Shinji, by inheriting it, blocked out the rest of the world. And
Right.
so Gendo was obsessed with Yui, and likewise Shinji ended up becoming obsessed with Rei to the point that he nearly caused
The
a third
apocalypse,
impact.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
like you have this amazing like thematic progression where
Yes.
Shinji makes all of the same mistakes that his dad did.
Yes.
Because his
Yep.
dad essentially like he inherits them from his father because of the way his father acts.
Yep.
And then Shineva is literally just him working through those problems
Yes.
and deciding, I don't want to be like that.
Yep.
And that's remarkable. Actually, like
Yeah.
it is actually remarkable that the resolution of all of this conflict is Shinji just sitting down in like nowhere space and having a conversation with his father, and his father realizing like all of the damage that he's done to Shinji, and realizing like there's really nothing that I can do for you here. I can't redeem myself for you. I can't become your father in a way that matters. Like, so I'll just step out of your life, right? I will remove myself from your life. In a way, it very much mirrors the way that Misato does not interact with Kaji Jr., right? Like,
Yeah.
she realizes it's a lot healthier for him if like he's raised by the community, if he doesn't know who his mother is. And likewise, Gendo realizes like, I've done a lot of damage to my son in pursuit of something. Like all along, Yui was right here, right? Like
Right.
this is what Yui wanted. Like she wanted me to raise Shinji, and I couldn't do that.
Right.
So the next best thing for me right now is just to remove myself from his life before I can do any more damage. And like, and then he just blinks out of existence. He just blinks out of reality, steps off the train, and he just is no more. And he takes the tape recorder with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think the fact that he turned around, apologized to Shinji while hugging him, child Shinji, right? The child that he left at the train station, and then he blinks out is like he acknowledged exactly what he did wrong, and then he left.
Yeah. Well, and it's not like he's just leaving him either. He recognizes that Shinji has grown into an adult and like is going to be okay, right?
Right.
That he has people who are kind of he has relationships with now that matter to him, and that he doesn't like he doesn't even need the tape recorder anymore because he doesn't need to shut himself out from the rest of the world anymore. And so he just takes that hang up and he leaves.
Yeah, he gives up on his ambitions, I think, is basically what the stepping off the train, symbolizes or whatever, among other things. And then Shinji is able to essentially take up the mantle, but in a different way, and realize his own wishes with the Neon Genesis and all of that.
Yeah, right.
But mostly just by confronting and acknowledging the other characters and the other people in his life, and finally stepping outside of himself to try and help them. Just like he tried to talk with his father and finally try and understand him.
Right. It is like such a, and this is like, who who would ever think that, right? Like, the fact that it happened is incredible, but like that's it on one hand is so like it's like almost anticlimactic, and that's almost the point, right? It feels like people were expecting this like one thing, and they got something very different, but also something that is very straightforward and makes a lot of sense, and ultimately is very difficult and not easy at all, right? And it's painful, but it is ultimately the healthier choice, right? The better thing, right? Is Shinji like resolving all of the trauma that he has, all of the problems that he has, and deciding that he can move forward, right? And Gendo stepping out of his life is indicative of that. But it's also like Gendo stepping out of Shinji's life is in a lot of ways like Anno, right, who is feeling himself in Gendo now, right? As a man 30 years older, right? Feels like it's him removing himself from Eva, right? He doesn't need to be there anymore, and he recognizes that like Eva can be important to people, right? He recognizes the impact that it has, and so Anno's like, well, I mean, the best thing I can do now is just to like fix all this shit and leave. I'm done now, right? And that's like, that is basically like, you can see that throughout the whole movie, right?
Yeah.
He's basically just like this is it. This is the end of Evangelion, and I will do everything that I can for you as people who have been following along and people who feel like they might need Evangelion, right? Because in a way, like, Anno needed Evangelion. And so he's just always been, like, for the past, like, 30 years, he's just been building Evangelion over and over again. Until eventually he comes across, like, the answer that he wants, right? Evangelion is, like, a question that he's been trying to answer for a long time.
Yeah.
That Shin Eva answers, that he finally has an answer to.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's an answer that you may read in the other ones, right? The idea that you need human relationships, but it doesn't feel so real until this movie. It feels like he really comes across like how that happens, right?
Yeah. I think that moment where I guess Gendo and Anno have that acknowledgement and they just kind of like pass it on to the younger generation is like, it's not something that we've ever seen. At least I don't think I've ever seen in any iteration of Evangelion, of the entire series at all, that Gendo would ever embrace Shinji like that.
Yeah, well, he like taking Shinji as kind of like this figurehead for the broken and maladapted child, the like the otaku who could never like grow up, right? He essentially is just like, here you go, I leave it up to you now.
Yeah, and the fact that he acknowledged that he was afraid of Shinji, I think, was also extremely poignant. That Gendo, desiring a world without AT fields, still had one of his own. Yeah, no, it was all like the focus on Gendo during this movie was just absolutely brilliant. I loved it.
It was remarkable, honestly. And it was in many ways unexpected, but also it just makes sense. Like, everything about the latter half of this movie is just like bonkers in the most mundane way possible, right? They're like, what is the best possible resolution between a 30-year feud between Shinji and his terribly abusive father? A conversation. How should we end the movie? This 30-year like Titan, this titanic like project of like of Japanese culture, something that has come to represent anime in a lot of ways. Just say goodbye to it. like, just write out Evangelion. It just doesn't exist anymore. Like, it's so like, it's almost like cliche in a way, but it's not, because it's so against what you would expect. It's anticlimactic on purpose. Like, and it's like, no, yeah, you know what? Fair enough, Anno. Fair enough.
Yeah, I enjoy, if only because he so Shinji says goodbye to each of the characters after, hashing out their problems with them and
Sure, yeah.
and whatnot. And then at the very end, after he decides that he's going to rebuild the world without Evangelion, he still has the choker. And I think that's just so that's so good, because he takes it on when he decides that he's going to pilot the Eva again willingly. He takes it on, and after, all the traumatic stuff has happened, Kaoru's head blowing up, and then him being reminded of it when he sees that Asuka also has one. And then at the end, when he's finally rebuilt the world, Mari removes it from him, and
yeah, and okay, all right. Obviously, it is now time to talk about Mari, destroyer of all that is Evangelion.
Yes, please.
So, yeah, you're completely right. Mari removing the choker from Shinji, basically releasing him from the responsibility of being an Eva pilot, is the just perfect endpoint, the perfect encapsulation of everything that Mari is meant to be. Right. There are a lot of kind of theories about like Mari, because Anno has kind of said outright, he's like, I want Mari to be a character that just destroys Evangelion, and people are like, what the hell does that mean?
Well, yeah, right? What are you saying?
Yeah, and like obviously, people suspect like Mari is kind of a stand-in for Moyoko, Anno's wife, right? And that would make a lot of sense. I think there's a little bit more to it, obviously. I don't think it's as straightforward as that. But I think that in many ways, Mari does represent kind of everything that Moyoko might represent to Anno, right? It is very much like Mari is a character that comes in, and she does not have the same hangups as the other Evangelion pilots. She is she does things for herself, but not in a way that is necessarily selfish, but just in a way that is forceful. She is a lot more like an anime character than a lot of the other characters are. Like she has this like vocal tick where she goes like, yeah. And there's a lot of jokes about that. She's very like Genki. She is a very stark contrast to the just very depressed rest of the cast.
Yes.
And she's also a breath of fresh air. I think we talked about her in the anniversary episode last year, but as a character, and in this movie, it is revealed that she has in fact been there since Gendo's like college days, where like she introduces her to Gendo, like Yui to Gendo, and Fuyutsuki calls her Maria Iscariot, Iscariot being like Judas Iscariot, the guy who killed Jesus, kind of, right? And that's very funny because we're still playing with the biblical imagery, obviously. But like the idea of Mari as the betrayer, and in many ways, like fans, I think like in general the like demographic that we generally associate with Evangelion, the like neckbeard otaku, hate Mari. I'm pretty sure they just hate her, right?
Really?
At least that's what I've heard. I mean, on one hand, it's probably just like waifu material. On the other hand, like very much like how dare you be happy, Anno, right?
Yeah, no, I definitely heard that point of view, is that they blamed Anno for being happy and getting married, and that's ruined the series.
How dare you? And Anno's like, guys, it was very hard for me. It will be very hard for you, but you can do it too. I promise, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is that like Mari is a character who is so not everything that Eva is, that she like is the perfect contrast to come and just wreck shit, and she really just does, right? Like she comes in, takes up a lot of screen time, she like kind of like bullies a lot of the other characters into like like she teases them, right? She is it is very funny because she acts both she acts very much like a friend, right? Like the kind of friend to like, okay, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but do you know when like you are just like very like vegetable depressed, like I'm catatonic, I don't want to do anything, like the Shinji like I watch Kaoru die depressed, right? You don't want to do anything, and like you have that one friend who just keeps inviting you out to do stuff, and like even though you're not really feeling it, maybe once in a while you'll be like, yeah, and like you appreciate the fact that they keep reaching out to you, right?
Yeah.
That is in a lot of ways what I feel like Mari is to both Shinji and Asuka, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think she's in this interesting position where she doesn't really try to, at least not to me, manipulate the characters' actions in any way. She doesn't try to force them to do things like how other characters kind of like try to like push Shinji this way or that way. She doesn't really do that with him. When he decides that he's gonna hide or run away, she just kind of like lets him do it. She just facilitates the what the characters are doing essentially, which I think is very it's cool.
Yeah. It's so like Mari is like essentially the sort of big driving force behind all of the changes that happen between the rebuilds and the rest of the series, because she doesn't exist in the rest of the series, right? She's like unique to the rebuilds and some of the extant properties, but like it is interesting to me that she is a character that is essentially primarily thematically there just to like stir shit up, right? And like I like that, right? I like the fact that I like what you said about how she doesn't force anybody to do anything really. She is a character and a person you can take very much at face value, right? She wears her heart on her sleeve. She wears her motivations on her sleeve. She says what she means, right? And I think that's a very important kind of character for Shinji and Asuka to have, right? Someone who isn't going to lie to them or tell them platitudes, but is just going to be as straightforward and as honest as possible, right? And you can, I think in a lot of ways, we can kind of credit Mari for maybe Asuka's development into like an adult in Shin Eva, right?
Sure, yeah.
They seem to have a very like close relationship with each other when they interact, and it's you know, I like Mari, right? I like Mari as a character. And I like the role that she serves in disrupting everything people kind of expected from Eva. And like Mari does like 90% of the piloting in the last two movies.
She does.
Right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And it's cool. You get through Mari the anime cool mecha fighting. Ooh, shiny, right? Oh, 100% tangent, 100% aside, like it was very, very cool in the opening sequence when she was shooting the gun and the barrel melted because she shot it for too long. I was like, huh, I have never seen any media do that before. That really does happen. Cool, right?
We do like to see that.
We do like to see that. Like the thing is that Shin Eva is a very contemplative piece. It thinks and it meditates and it like just exists for a lot of it. But also there's these cool action sequences and like Mari gets to like fuck shit up. And then you get, I think, the coolest Asuka sequence ever. Holy shit, she's so cool. Like listen, okay, here's the thing. I know that Eva is like a deep, like, contemplative piece that works through Anno's depression and is like about him growing up into a well-adjusted adult in society and like learning that relationships with people are important. Also, cool robot fights, cool. Like, when you see like Mari and Asuka just like their eyes glow in the cockpits and they just go fucking feral, you're just it activates a primal part of my brain that just produces like endless amounts of serotonin. Like I could watch Asuka fuck shit up forever. And obviously like in End of Eva she really goes down swinging, and that's pretty.
One of the most epic fights in the whole series, if not the most, was her fight in End of Eva.
Yeah, it's delicious. Like when Asuka decides she's gonna become an angel, you're like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah, she's pulling a pill thing out of her eye.
But also, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Shin Eva does so much justice by its characters, right? And like they're characters that really kind of deserve something now and then, given how much they get beat the shit out of, like, emotionally and physically throughout the series. And it feels like, in many ways, a kind of wish fulfillment, right? But it feels like that's kind of the point, right? Eva feels like Shin Eva feels like it is the end of everything Eva, and so they give us a lot of that fan service along with all of the very quiet moments, right?
Yes. I really enjoy that balance of the rural parts of the movie where we're in the village, and the robot battles, and then of course the very psychological emotional resolution at the very end. I think it all made for a very entertaining movie, that's for sure.
Yeah, totally. Lots I'm just telling you, if you like the action fights, there's some fan service there for you. If you like watching anime characters just fucking go apeshit, yeah, there's some fan service there for you. Ooh, oh boy. Like, listen, not to like undermine the last like hour and a half that we've been talking about how important going outside and touching grass is. Like, cool robot fights good too. And like, okay, this is important to bring up. Is I think that is the point, right? Is like Anno is not saying you have to like stop being like an otaku. He's not saying you have to stop enjoying the things that you enjoy. He's saying,
yeah.
Like you can enjoy them, right? Those are the parts of the movies that he's like saying like this is for you, right?
Definitely.
This, right?
I definitely felt like, I mean, there are a lot of, fans are always going to be upset over one thing or another.
Yeah.
But I genuinely feel like this movie was a movie for the fans by how many things that he put into it that feel specifically for fans, right?
Yeah. Well, like, it is the end of a 30-year project, essentially. And so it makes a lot of sense to thank your fans in that way. But also,
100%.
But also it like makes thematic sense to be like, okay, robots are cool. Let's just straight up, guys, robots are fucking cool. Watching giant robots beat the shit out of each other never gets old. It's never gonna not be cool, right? But also, like, it is important that you remember to maintain human relationships with other people, no matter how hard it is, right? Those things can exist in tandem with each other. Just look at me. I made this movie for you. Daddy made your favorite content.
Oh my god.
And like, wow, I can see how this movie might have received some backlash from some people who might be a little bit bitter about how the movie attempts to shepherd them into being healthier people, right? Some people don't want to be healthy people. Look at Gendo Ikari for like 90% of Eva. Some people really just want to live in giant robot land for the rest of their lives. And like, it is fine to enjoy those things and to find enjoyment in those, but it is important to remember that fiction is not reality. They may affect each other, and there is a line that it becomes increasingly blurry every single day. And this is kind of what we were talking about in the sampler episode that just went up about like about escapist fiction, right? Anno is essentially saying like, all right, I've been making Eva for like 30 years now. You have escaped into the world. I'm gently guiding you back out.
It is true. That is, and then he ends it with a real shot of the real world. And the characters running out to embrace it.
Yeah, right? Like, even the characters in Evangelion are allowed to now escape the confines of their fictional space and become well-adjusted adults and live their lives. Right? It's so, like, it's so obvious, it's so, like, blatant, that, like, no wonder it definitely offended a lot of very specific people, right?
Yeah, the people who don't want to do that.
And it's like, yeah, like that is the kind of demographic that a show like Remake Your Life is made for. People who want really hard escapist fiction that lets them disappear. Just, I don't want to exist anymore. And like
is that why we like this and we hate that?
Renu, that's exactly why. It is the primary reason why. Because because Eva is in many ways a kind of escapist fiction, or at the very least has become an escapist fiction,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like people look at Eva and they see a world essentially devoid of people, right?
Yeah.
And they find that to be comforting, even though that's not the point of the show.
Right.
And Anno comes back and he makes the rebuilds and he's just like, the world is full of people. It is difficult to maintain relationships. It will hurt like fuck.
Mm-hmm.
But it is the only way you can possibly move forward, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's astounding to me. I don't think I've ever seen another piece of fiction that so gently acknowledges that this may be a piece of escapism and then gently guides you back out into the real world. Actually, there is one other one. It's Silver Spoon. Okay. Yeah. So Silver Spoon is like that. But like two. So but like it reminds me a lot of that in one of the central themes of Silver Spoon. Actually, this is actually funny that I brought it up because I just remembered. One of the central themes of Silver Spoon is running away is okay. It is okay to run away and use that time to recoup your strength and like take your time and like take things slowly. But you know, in Eva you get the added level of, but you still have to do it, right? You know, Shinji spends so much of Evangelion, the franchise, saying, I must not run away, and then subsequently running away, and then feeling ashamed about it, right? When this movie essentially comes back and it says, it was okay to run away. You know, it was okay. It's okay to run away now, if that's where you need to go. But at some point, you will have to get up and you will have to brush yourself off and you will have to continue moving because the rest of the world will move without you. Right?
Yeah.
And it is hard and painful and like torturous, honestly, making relationships with people and maintaining those relationships. God knows, right? But it's also the answer. It is the answer to all of the feelings that you explore in escapist fiction, is to eventually return to reality and go about your life and be fulfilled by it, right? It's such a stark contrast to so much of media nowadays, which says, hey, get lost in me and never come out. Like, Anno's just like, all right, I made Eva. I've been making it for 30 years. It's time to go. And like, it ends so poignantly because they just say goodbye to the Evas. They just, goodbye, Eva. Pew! They all just disappear. Literally, they're just gone. They just blink out of existence. Anno's like, they don't exist anymore. I'm done. And
every single Eva.
And like, fuck, holy shit, cool, yeah, woo! you know, it's hard to say goodbye. It really is, right?
Yeah,
like,
of course.
Obviously, for us, we have been invested in Evangelion for quite some time. I was kind of a late convert to Evangelion in general, but like, our podcast is named after an Eva reference. Our anniversary episodes are Eva episodes. You know, we talk. Our opening for a long time was the Eva theme, back with some other stuff, and like, you know, it's hard to say goodbye to something that has been such a big part of your life. It must have been even harder for Anno, but Anno did it, and so can you. And that's kind of the message that he gives you. And then they name drop the series. They're like, Neon Genesis. And you're like, all right, Anno.
Oh, okay. No, I love that. Hopefully he was able to make the movie the way he intended it to be, as close as possible anyway.
Yeah,
and he was able to send it off I think it was a beautiful send off.
It was. I 100% agree. I think this is the best possible send off that Eva could have. I am legitimately 100% satisfied with this movie. I watched this movie and I was like, I have never felt more closure for anything in my entire life.
I know, right?
I'm legitimately completely satisfied.
Yeah.
This wasn't what I expected, but it was everything I needed.
And I think they left off with enough ambiguity at the end that people who still want to like have Ava on the brain can still think about it, right? Like, what does the ending mean? Why were the other pilots on the other side of the train station? Does it mean that they're like dead or something? Because, you know, Shinji was like saying how he was going to rewrite the world, but he wasn't going to undo anything. Like, all this and that and the other. But I think by and large, it was such a good way to end the story, and I'm very excited that I got to see adult Shinji and adult the other characters a bit, and
yeah,
it was just great.
It's great, and I mean, like, obviously, this isn't the end of Ava for us. I mean, it is and it isn't, right? We're still gonna talk about Evangelion. Our anniversary episode this year is going to be about the 3.0 movie, and then most likely the year after that we're just gonna be talking about this movie again, right? Like, we're still going to be talking about it. I think it's still valuable to examine and talk about, but as far as our kind of like fictional investment in Evangelion as a series, like, this feels like such a fitting ending, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Like, it really works. It does.
It works. Yeah.
And like, that's it, you know? I feel like there's nothing more to say, at least not now. Maybe there will be something that comes up when we inevitably rewatch it and talk about it. I'm sure I'll have some more new, interesting, cool insight upon rewatch. But for now, like, let us usher you back into the real world.
Whoa! That segue!
Yeah. All right. Who are you?
Woo!
Where can we find you on the internet?
I'm Renu, also known as Swan. You can find me on Twitch and Twitter and Tumblr and Facebook and all that at SwanDrawn. You can find me on Instagram at swan.drawn. I am returning to the real life outside of conventions and am working on commissions, and maybe I'll finish Judgment very soon.
Oh my god, you're still playing it?
I'm in the last chapter, okay? I had to put it on pause while I was running around traveling and whatnot. And yeah, hopefully I'll be able to like start Judgment 2 after I'm finished with it. And
nice.
Yeah. That's it for me.
Cool. You can find me all the places at Literal Soup. If you want to watch me exist, I have been streaming a lot recently. I've been playing a couple of games, Yakuza 3, Disco Elysium. My Final Fantasy 14 subscription is on hold because I don't have money. But I'll get back to that at some point. And yeah. I've been playing Slay the Spire too. That's a very fun game. But yeah, if you want to come hang out, that would be absolutely lovely. I usually stream around like 9 p.m. Pacific time, or maybe like a guerrilla stream during the day. That's just the way it works, really. But yeah, that's where you can find me. And I think that's it. Our opening is by Scott2 Network, and our ending is by Takumakata. And the patrons we are thanking this month, this episode, I suppose is more appropriate to say. Evan Williams, Magpie Mirror Test, Claire, Frostfall, Sean Dow, Cherubel, Undead Uncanny, and Dylan Buds. Thank you so much for the support.
Wow.
We really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Because of you, we get to watch Shin Eva.
Shin Eva. And I suppose on that note, we will see you next time.
See you next time.
なら、また明日ね。